For Howard, yeah. Yeah, I don't know if we were in this specific room. I don't really necessarily remember having to go downstairs. That seems like trouble. No, I got a completely different.
Surprise. 8 pounds, 15 ounces. I'm like 35 weeks.
I see the back of my car.
I worked up the whole term. She was 5 better than supposed to. Yes, shoot. How old are you? 14? 20? Are you married? No? Not yet? So we're listening to the street.
You told her to go through and look
I got on the bus. So I got on you for Thanksgiving. My wife will be here in a year, so.
I would, Doc, I would maybe otherwise,
especially on the toll road. The toll road is really.
I somehow remember this. I remember that. I remember going up like the floor was free. Yes. It was a portent of my future. I was always on the stage. I was always I still have my mother's Thank you for everything I heard.
Hello, how are you? Thank you very much.
This is my wife.
Hello. Thank you very much. It is. Yeah, that's it. That's like, I can't say that to me. It's like, I mean, yeah. It seems weird. I don't know what to say.
Tough time.
I know.
Send your drivers. pass that way.
Right, okay, I hear about you all the time. I'm sorry. That's okay. I was trying to process, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, my whole arm. Oh my gosh.
That's bring it together. Mine's very great. You're busy to make it. Literally. 30,000 people, and they paid you 8,000. Oh, yeah. 35. I just want the term would have been like a couple of explosions.
I'm so sorry. And I'll even ask them for a little training, Where do you live? Oh, you know that. And where are you? Oh, yeah. This wood giant. Is it near like yellow? It's gonna be some nice. Oh, okay.
River runs south.
Oh, okay. So is it an in-town house or is it a farm?
Believe it or not, it's in town, but we have about 18 acres.
Huh?
We met up together. Yeah, I haven't been down there. He's still down there working towards some. How close? Well, we're in the painting section, but it's not bad. You know, but thank God it's over
If I may have your attention, please. I'm going to ask everyone to please be seated. If I may have your attention, we're about to begin our service. If I could ask everyone to please be seated. I'll also ask that everyone please turn your cell phones to their silent mode if you have not done so already. Conducting our service today is Rabbi Jeffrey Wild.
Adonai, ma'adam ki'ehu ben edosh v'tefetlehu. Adam nehebel dama. Dama titzel omer b'boker tzitz b'chalach. Le'erev yimalel v'yavesh. Kashem edosh adaka v'tomer. Shuvu b'nei Adam. These are the words of the psalmist saying, Adonai, eternal God, what are we that you have regard for us? What are we that you would even be mindful of us? We are all of us just a breath. Our days are a passing shadow. We come and go like grass, which in the morning it shoots up and is renewed, and in the evening of all of our lives, the grass fades and withers. But God, you cause all of us to return unto dust, saying, Shuvu b'nei Adam, return, O mortal ones. Would that we were wise, and would that we understood whither we go from here, for when we die we carry nothing with us, not our glory, not our wealth. But God, you say, Shmor Tam or Eyashar, mark the wholehearted, behold the upright. Those are the ones who shall find peace, who shall find shalom. Friends, we gather today to remember someone who is certainly Tam Eyashar, was wholehearted and upright, and he was sweet and smart and kind and loving. Ronald Epstein. His memory for blessing. Adonai mia gorba malecha v'yishkon apar kochecha v'lech tamim po'el tzedek dove emet b'lavo lo ragal al shano lo asa v're'ehu ra v'cherpa lo nasa al krovo v'yizeh be'nav imas ve'et yirei Adonai yichaved Yishba v'hora v'lo yomer, kasbo v'lo natan v'neshech, v'shokad al naki lo lachach, v'sei elech lo lam. Adonai, who may abide in your tents, who may dwell in your holy mountain. It is those who are upright. It is those who do justly. It is those who speak truth within their hearts. It is those who would not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them. It is those who scorn the lawless. It is those who honor God. It is those who give their word and do not retract that word, who would never exploit others, who would never take bribes. Those who live in that way will never be shaken. I think that is a very good description of the qualities of Ronald Epstein. In our handouts, you'll find the 23rd Psalm. I'll read the Psalm first in Hebrew, and then we can read it together in English. Anaro I lo efsar. Vino desher yapitzeni, al meimino koti nafaleni nafshir shomei. Yan cheni v'ma'avle tzedek v'ma'an shemo. Gam ki ele v'geit samavet, lo yirav yitay hadi. Shivtakan v'shatecha, heimai nachotim. Ta'arok v'nai shulchan, meged zorai, yishanta v'shen roshi, kosi v'layat. Av tov v'tesri v'furi kol yimei chaya, v'shakti v'beit Adonai, v'ora yamim. We read together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. to rise now as we do the traditional Kriya, the tearing of what we call the Shiva ribbons or the mourning ribbons. You will recite this blessing after me. This blessing acknowledges God even in times of challenge, times of sadness, as the Dayan Ha'emet, as the judge of truth. So please repeat after me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Dayan Ha'emet. Dayan Ha'emet. Amen. The blessing that Eileen and Melanie just recited, as I said, acknowledges God as the true judge, which is sometimes hard to acknowledge, sometimes hard to accept when the world is the way it is, when sad things happen, especially when tragic things happen, it's sometimes hard to get there. Yet our tradition nudges us in the direction of that there is a guiding hand and a true judge that is somehow behind all of it. It's a challenging theology, but we are pushed and challenged to believe that, and we strive to do so. The third chapter of Kohelet, or Ecclesiastes, very well-known words, conveys the same message, that everything happens at an appropriate time. לכל זמן, ועת לכל חפץ תחת השמיים, עת ללב ועת למות, עת לטעת ועת לחקור נטוע, עת לפרוץ ועת לפרוץ, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, עת ספוד ועת לפקוד. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot that which is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to grieve, and a time to dance, a time to throw stones, a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time when we must refrain from our embraces, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep, a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time for silence and a time to speak. And so this is an appropriate time to speak words in memory of dear Ronald Epstein. Shem Tov M'Shem Tov, we read in Ecclesiastes, a good name is better than precious oil. A good name is better than precious oil. Chapter 7, beginning of chapter 7 of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet. And it's true, when you hear the word or the name Ron Epstein, you're really hearing a good thing. You're hearing a good name. Because you sort of feel, and we believe that the name, a name, an individual's name, even God's name, the names of God, embody the essence of the person. And there could be another person with the name Ron Epstein, which would evoke completely different feelings. But when you hear Ron Epstein, the man who we remember and sadly say goodbye to today, it is something precious. It's like you're in possession of something precious. For Ron was so good, and he was so kind. I think Ron Epstein bore an authentic decency, a menschlichkeit. And then Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, by tradition authored by King Solomon, goes on to say something a little more challenging. After it says that a good name is better than precious oil, it says, V'yom hamavet, v'yom ha-hivaldo, that the day of death is better than the day of one's birth. That's a strange statement, isn't it? Why would the day of one's death be better than the day of one's birth? It's curious. So our sages, in their creative way, try to explain. It's like a ship, a boat that is launched from the ports. And as it's departing, those who are on the shore on the pier or the port, they're watching the ship depart, and they don't know what kind of journey the ship will have. They don't know what dangers it might encounter. They don't know if it will be a successful journey. They don't know anything about the journey at the beginning. There's a sense of excitement, but maybe also a sense of trepidation as well. That's the day of one's birth. But then, later, when the ship returns home, returns to the ports, our sages say, then we know that the ship has returned safely. And God willing, that the journey, the voyage, was a worthy voyage. That's the last day. That's the day of one's death. Ron Epstein has returned to the ports. And we know now of the journey. We know the itinerary. We know the contours. We know the journey. And we know that it was a journey, a life of great worth. It was not a journey without challenges and without heartache. There was that, of course. There was pain and sadness. And yet still, Ron Epstein's journey was fundamentally good, for he was good. He shared with others his love and his humanity and his gentleness and his caring and his humor. He loved primarily his family, his fellow Jews. He loved his community, friends, and country as well. And while we mourn the end of the journey, we thank God for the traveler's safe return home, for the righteous truly return home. Ron was the youngest son of Jimmy and Faye, brother to Robert or Bob and Richard or Vicky, the three R's, Robert, Richard, Ronald. Ron was a handsome young man. I had not seen photos of Ron. I've known Ron for the last 10 years, but I had not seen photos of Ron. In one photo he is holding, that he showed me the other night, he's holding a book. Maybe it's the picture that he put in here. Yeah, he's holding a book. And I thought that was appropriate for Ron, because as long as I've known him, honestly, I think in every venue that I've seen him, he had a book with him. A book in front of him, in his hands, whatever. I love seeing him come to our shul, Ezra Havanim, the Nile Temple Jewish congregation. He comes to the shul for services frequently. This is pre-pandemic. But I particularly love seeing him at classes, wearing his trademark, you know what I'm going to say, his suspenders, and smiling his sweet smile. He'd find his regular place around our horseshoe of tables. Then he'd get up, put his jacket down, he'd get up, he'd grab a Tanakh, a Bible, and as well as a plate of treats, because we always serve treats, and Ron liked that too. And then we'd all read together, we'd learn together. Over the past couple of years, Ron was undaunted by the pandemic. He was at all of the classes. I was teaching 3 classes a week, and I have been. And Ron was often the first or the second person there, often arriving, logging onto Zoom before I got on. And when he would see me on the screen, he'd smile, and I know you know the smile I'm talking about. And he'd say, "Hi, Rabbi," in his genuinely kind way. In class, Ron always volunteered to take a turn reading, because we would read through whatever text that we were reading, studying at the time, and he would pretty much every class offer comments as well. His comments were unerringly thoughtful. One of his common observations was expressing concern for his Jewish sisters and brothers and the prevalence of anti-Semitism, the endurance of anti-Semitism and the struggles that we have gone through. And I'm just imagining how sad and dismayed he would have been, as we all have been, about that hostage situation in Texas this Shabbat yesterday into the night, and we thank God for the conclusion of that nightmare. Ron's love of learning was not limited to Jewish texts. He had a thirst for knowledge. He loved books, hardcover books in particular. He just loved reading. He was the organizer of a book group, a men's book group. He read newspapers, plural, daily. And perhaps the picture that is in here, holding that book or notebook, perhaps that was taken at the University of Illinois, where he studied after high school. He continued to learn later. He went to Oakton. He learned things like accounting. He had his career primarily as a recorder of deeds. He worked in Chicago for many years and then up in Skokie. He had other interests as well. He was a dynamic person. I did not know that he was active in Toastmasters, for instance. And of course, he loved sports as well. Playing them, watching them on TV. He would play softball. He was part of the bowling league. Big Bears fan, Chicago teams in general. Yes, on TV, but sometimes it was a special treat to go to a game. And Rabbi Neil Brief, who was my predecessor, Rabbi Emeritus, has a very fond memory of being in a suite with Ron and others. I believe Charles Kreisberg was present as well at the United Center a few years back to watch the Bulls. And Ron played tennis, too. He played with a group of guys, one of them being his dear son, Howard, Zichrono Livracha. He was deeply, deeply devoted to his children, to Howard and to Melanie. They were raised in Rogers Park, and Ron, as a father, was there. He was present in every possible way. He was not the kind of father who was remote or distant, not at all. He was near and dear and caring as a father. And Melanie and Howard loved going out with him. They'd go to dinner, they'd go to the movies. Thursday nights were special nights with Dad. And then, nearly 2 decades ago, very close to 2 decades ago, Ron went on a date, a first date with a special woman, Eileen. She may not have been particularly impressed by the red suspenders, but she was deeply, deeply impressed by the man. She was deeply impressed by his warmth, and particularly by what a great father he was, by what a great family man he was, by the love that was so evident that really just came out of him for his children, for Howard and Melanie, as well as Sydney and Kayla. And they were a match, Ron and Eileen. And so they married. They were married by Rabbi Neil Brief, I believe Eileen said 18 and a half years ago. 18 and a half years ago, June would have been their 19th anniversary. Through the years, Ron, not surprisingly, also became a beloved member of Eileen's family. Lori, David, Andrea, and Shoshana, Malka, Ezzy, Amigaya, Yocheved, Connie, Morty, Vashi, Yaakov, and Shira. I hope I included everyone, and everyone else as well, the growing family too. He was just like a grandfather to them. And he would tell me how excited he was for your simchas, and may you know only simchas. But we know, as I mentioned, there is a veil of tears over every life, even blessed lives. And I know that this family has recently experienced sadness. May God comfort those who mourn. And yes, losing Howard was a terrible sadness for Ron. That was 2016. For Ron, for Melanie, for all of you. Ron did everything that he could for his son. He went above and beyond. And in some situations, it's not always clear what kind of help is appropriate, but Ron was guided by love, by the deepest, deepest love for his son. He did everything that a loving parent could. And that loss certainly remained with him over the last few years. Thank God, truly thank God, that during that time and throughout the years, since and before, that he had you, that Ron had all of you. Eileen at his side for 18 years. Melanie, Sydney, Kayla, Lori, David, everyone, all of you. Thank God he had you, and thank God you had him as well. That applies to all of us. He was beloved. He was beloved by friends. He was beloved at our shul. He was beloved by the rabbi, by me. He was just a sweet, good, gentle soul. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love that you make. That means that Ron took, in other words, he was able to receive love because he shared love. And he received caring and kindness, because he shared caring and kindness. That is the kind of person that he was. That is the journey that he made. That is the journey that we all hope to make throughout our lives. May Ron Epstein's life be his life of sweetness and caring and love, truly be an enduring example for all of us to follow. Zichrono Livracha, may his memory be for blessing. Amen. Amen.
Hi. You guys know? Normally, my dad is the one who'd be up here right now speaking to all of you. He went out of his way at times to join things and go places where he could speak, clubs and such. He liked talking, learning, as the rabbi had stated, so normally he would be the one up here, but I guess today it's me. Normally he would have written something down, but I have not. I'm just gonna wing it because that's what I do. My dad, as the rabbi said, he was a caring and loving man. Above all, he did love his family, especially my brother and I, who unfortunately passed away. Also, there were rough times with Howard, but he was always there for both of us, financially, emotionally, all the time, even if at times we didn't want him to be. Like, he would call us all the time, and if I didn't call him back immediately, he would call me back and think something was wrong. So he was very caring, and he'll be greatly missed by all. We would speak often. Family was foremost in his mind all the time. He would tell me all the happenings of everyone who lived, who got married, who had children. A lot of times that was frequent with Eileen's family. I did that a lot. So yeah, that would be a regular thing. He enjoyed telling me all the good things and unfortunately the bad things, which we all got through together. And I mean, he was always there for everyone, for everything. And to Eileen, I really appreciate you being his loving companion all these years. He would always say that he was very flexible, but as we know, he wasn't always overly flexible. But he liked things when he wanted them, like his steak and such. But he was overall, he was pretty flexible. So thank you, Eileen, for being with him and helping him get through all the stuff in the good times and in the bad times. And I know he enjoyed all his friends, the extended family, and all the events and everything. He, I think, had a pretty full life, even though the end was quite abrupt. I mean, he had a good life, so we all enjoyed having him around, and he will be greatly missed. And Dad, I love you, and I miss you already, and thank you for being such a great father.
Thank you, Melanie. David?
I'm Eileen's son. I want to possibly say a few words on behalf of the family. To amplify what everyone has said already, Ron could speak, he would thank everyone for coming. We want to thank as a family also everyone who took time out of their day to drop what they're doing, to show respect. I think that he wants all to say that, so for sure, and that goes to every last one. I think that part of what I think we learn from people and learn from things is object lessons. I was telling everybody, even in my own family, by my Uncle Alan, I was taken aback myself because when this happened, everyone thinks about their personal things. They think about how they're going to arrange for things. So I was saying, I said, well, I'll do it with my mother, but I'm thinking about my schedule and thinking through it. And the second I spoke to my mother, she had told me, Uncle Alan, who I know had just gone to Las Vegas 3 days earlier, a week earlier or something, had so matter-of-factly just dropped everything he was doing to come back. I think that there's certain things you learn about from family members and people around you that sort of blow you away, and you're sort of saying, I can't even do that. I can't look at my life and just say, what's the most important thing? Boom. And you learn, and this is like what Ron also talks to us about also, you learn what the importance of family is from seeing examples and from seeing how people put the right things first. Not to mention the fact that his kids were at my mother's house within an hour or something of this happening. I was with my cousin Steve. I You talk about family, you talk about, in theory, what something means, you talk about what it really means. And the fact that our family could be the fact that Ron would be there all the time. The gratitude for the time he spent with my mother, with our own family. He thought nothing of giving of himself on a constant routine, regular basis. And as simple as those things are, those actions, that generation, you know, the greatest generation, so to speak, right? That we can learn from, it's something you do sometime in this day and age when everyone was always, what's in it for me? And, you know, why should I? It's always amazing to see the examples of our predecessors, our previous generation. I know that, as we've all spoken about, Ron loved his family. He suffered a great deal of tragedy. I would just point out on one thing that I can tie this in some extent to the last week's Torah portion. We learned this last week in the Shalach, which was the Torah portion we read weekly in Shul, in synagogue. So there was a point, you bring an interesting point. It sounds like a negative point, but let's listen carefully. That when the children of Israel were fleeing Egypt and they were lost in the desert, there was a point when it says that God spoke to Moses and said that they should camp at a place Kefir, stopping, so to speak, between Migdal and the sea, before a place called Baal Tzafon. We're supposed to stop there. It says if you stop there, then Pharaoh will say, it says the words El B'nai Israel, to the children of Israel. They're in prison in the land, meaning they can't get out, they're stuck in the midbar. It'll create the impression that there's a chance for Pharaoh to come attack them. But everyone asks the question, and the Meforshim and the Chumash, all the commentators wonder, what does it mean he spoke to the children of Israel? All of the children of Israel had left. We had learned that many had died in the plagues, the plague of darkness, the plague of the firstborn, and seemingly every last Jew was out of there. So most of the commentators explain that it doesn't mean to, it means about the children of Israel, but there is a famous commentary called Targum Yonasan Ben Uzziel, who doesn't always go like the typical way, and he says, no, that's not how I understand this. What I understand from my tradition is that there were two Jews remaining, the famous Jews that we talk about, Dustin and Aviram, it says. That these were the Jews who had originally were not that great Jews. These Jews were the ones who seemingly picked out Moses when he was hitting the Egyptian and reporting them. These were Jews later on, who joined the Bnei Israel at some point. They left Egypt actually in the end. And they were the ones who were messed up with this whole incident of Korah, where they ended up eventually being called out. But the question is asked, well then, if they were staying in Israel, if they stayed behind, if they were already the ones that Pharaoh was speaking to, and they were almost still in council of Pharaoh, so why are they around? I mean, what's going on? What is their merit whatsoever that they're even in the picture still? So they say something very interesting. They apparently were taskmasters. You see in the Holocaust, that they had the job of marshaling and herding the Jews while they were slaves. But the question would be then, so what is their merit? So taskmasters still have to account for what they do. And if they don't do what they're supposed to do, they bear the punishment of the Egyptians in this case, or whoever the guards might be over them. And in that fact that they suffer by having to do what their job that they do is, they're suffering on behalf of the fact that for whatever reason they weren't tough enough, they weren't strict enough, that actual bearing of the national burden, so to speak, nice of al-Khabero, they say, it's accepting the lot or the plight of man, so to speak, that those sorts of people, even the low of the low, let alone, imagine at a higher level, are still given tremendous credit. Ron, like nobody I know, went through suffering in the sense of just not being okay with what everyone else was going through. I know Ron with his son, who I love very, very much. He did, part of the problem was his greatness. Part of the problem was he just couldn't get through it. We know of many great people of our generation who literally seem to live and feel what goes on with everyone around them, who can't just take it easily, who don't just, okay, so that happened. He couldn't let things just roll off. He internalized them to a fault, obviously, to the point where it would eat him alive at times. But it takes a certain level of a person, a certain tremendous level of a person, who embodies that sort of care and love and deep understanding of understanding the world around them, what's next to them. They say that one of the reasons you know, the object lessons to learn going forward. You know, they say that one of the reasons that we are in the diaspora, that we've not been merited, that we lost the temple, so to speak, that we're thrown out of Israel, is because of what they call sinus finum, the blank, baseless hatred, so to speak, right? So they say, what is a cure for baseless hatred? The flip side, baseless love. And if we can learn to somehow, some way, just share love for no good reason, for the reason that you're a person, that you exist. And I think when you look at somebody like Ron, who managed to embody a spirit of deep-seated love and caring because it's the right thing to do, because it's what has to be, not because I need to give a long explanation, not because they did me a favor, not just because they're family, because they're a person, because they're another person suffering. I think that there's a lot we can learn and build on. I practice medicine. I tell my patients a lot of times who go through various periods of mourning, you know, there's positive aspects and negative aspects. Certainly we want to pay tribute to the person who passed, but I think maybe we can all walk away today and also say to ourselves, you know, at the very least, what's the best tribute of all for a person, right? The lasting memory of that person is to think about what they taught us and what they were trying to teach us and what their behaviors and actions taught us. And we can work on learning to possibly love like Ron, to possibly think about, hey, what is going on with the next guy? What about my next door neighbor? Should I say hello to the mailman? Who's worrying about them? I think that if we can work on this in our own lives, I think that's the best fruit of all to Ron. If we can internalize that, then we're carrying that Ron along with us and that level of what he was really quietly trying to teach us all. I think that could be the greatest gift of all. Again, thank you all for coming, to my mother, to Melanie, to the whole family. I definitely share an uncle in sorrow, and we should live to be a merit for all he stood for and all the hard work he did.
Thank you, Lord. Vedahi Reshit, Tirat Aklit, Chaim Masahim, Mahalikat Tzmicha, V'Shalal V'Shalal. Birth is a beginning, death a destination, life a journey, a going and a growing from stage to stage. And life is indeed a journey. And the journey of Ronald Epstein, that dear man, has now come to a sad conclusion. Before the El Malay Rachamim, just an announcement about Shiva. Shiva will occur at Eileen and Ron's home at the following times. This evening, today until after the service, after the adjournment until 9 p.m. So today and this evening until 9 p.m. Tomorrow, Monday, from 7 to 9. And after that, we have a regular evening minyan at our synagogue and every weeknight. And I will make the Zoom address available to Eileen, to whomever, and Ron's name will be mentioned for Moorish Kaddish during that time as well. And we can arrange more opportunities for people to speak if you like, and so forth during that time. Please now rise for El Malay Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Malay Rachamim, Shofei Ram Romim, Amsei Panepona Tachat Kape Hashina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Yezohar Akiem Asirim, Lenishmat Yefet Yolev Ben Yaakov Uteyo, Shalach Olamot. V'Rachamim Yaftirehu B'Sedek Kenapav V'Olamim, V'Yitor V'Tor HaChaim Et Nishmato, Adonai Kenachalato, Yadua Kishalom, Amishkavo, V'Nomah. Amen. Compassionate God, Eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence with the holy and the pure who shine like the light of the heavens. To Ronald Epstein, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence and within the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and we say, Amen. You may be seated.
Our services here in the chapel have now come to a conclusion. We will continue with the committal service at the gravesite. We will bring the casket up here shortly. We will ask everyone to please follow behind the funeral coach. If you would like to walk, you can, or you can certainly drive your vehicles. At this time, I'll ask for the pallbearers to please come forward, anyone acting as a pallbearer. I'll ask that you get your coats, because we will be going directly outside. Once the casket and the pallbearers have come forward and gone up, then anyone else who needs to use the elevator may go up to the main floor and also escort us to the grave for the committal service. Pallbearers, please come forward. Pallbearers for right hand and follow behind. We will need your assistance once we get upstairs. Again, I would recommend grabbing the coats on your way out. Everyone else, if you need to collect your things and get your coats, you can certainly head to the lobby area and wait for the elevator to come back.